Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome, or hopefully it's welcome back to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and our show today is Talking Heads. And if you're joining us for the first time, you are certainly in for a treat. Talking Heads is a platform where experts come from around the world to share their knowledge, their expertise, and their success with us to help make us better personally and professionally. And each expert has their own show, which is 30 minutes long. My expert presenter today is Mr. red.olaughlin. Let's welcome him to the show. Hi, welcome.
It's been almost like 11 minutes since we were joined by the hip here on TV, but it's always great to be back with you, Dr. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Red. It's always fun to be with you. And we've worked together on 2 books, and we're working on 2 more books, and we're working together on the show, and also with the show before and the Talking Heads panel. And I could go on. And I know sometime soon you're going to be heading up a panel yourself. So there's a lot of collaboration here. And I think there's definitely a lot of respect. So thank you very much. I'm going to go backstage and produce the show, and I'll come back and chat with you afterwards.
I'll pretend like I know what I'm doing. Hi, red.olaughlin here. I am not a medical doctor. I do not have a degree in that field. I have never worked in the pharmaceutical industry. Everything I do is what I research and find out about. My first love is chemistry. I use that nowadays to delve into the human body at the cellular level. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating the symptom. In this series that we're going on right now on heart health, this is number 3, I believe, and we're talking about additional causes of heart disease. Last week we talked about 6 or 7. Today we have probably looks like about 7, and we're going to go in a little bit detail. And as you notice, as we're going to go through, since almost everything today is going to deal with cholesterol, we're going to break it down into the individual components of what is really important. So, Dr. Jacqueline, if you would bring up the first slide, I'd appreciate it. So our slide today, the topics we're going to talk about that cause heart disease, deal with cholesterol in general, the components of cholesterol, the LDL, HDL, and then we have a couple vitamins that I think are very important to understand because they work in very, very nicely with regard to cholesterol and with regard to heart disease in itself. Next slide, Dr. Jacqueline. If somebody were to ask you what is cholesterol, it is basically it's an unsaturated alcohol. It's a steroid or a lipid, and it's a fat molecule of sorts. But it's a strange fat because it cannot be exercised off. You can't burn it off like you would fat. It's a different kind of molecule. However, every single cell in the body needs it. It's made in the liver, and it is a building block for cells. It's a protective component of the myelin in our nerves. We find it in our food. We find it in a lot of places. But as we're looking at it, the primary purposes of the cholesterol is to be the generate sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone. And without cholesterol, you would have a major problem in that particular area. The cells, every cell in the body has a structure. Part of that structure is cholesterol. And then the liver itself, even though it actually produces cholesterol and clears the body of cholesterol, cholesterol is also needed for the bile production, which is very, very important. And in the skin, you have a precursor. It's called 7-deoxy dehydroxy cholesterol. And when the sunlight hits that particular precursor, then you start into a photosynthesis that converts the sunlight into a vitamin D, which is really a hormone, not really a vitamin. And then it goes through its process. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But we get the cholesterol either by we make it inside our bodies or we get it from the foods we eat. And so you have several issues that can happen with regard to liver disease, heart disease, kidney disease, all because they're associated some level, shape, or form with cholesterol. So why don't we go to our first particular one? Next slide, please. And let's talk about excess cholesterol. Well, cholesterol is made up of several components, and LDL is one of them. LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. You have a VLDL, which is very low or small dense cholesterol. You have HDL, which is high density lipoprotein. Then we have a couple other issues in there that we need to distinguish between triglycerides and fat. The fat are the cells that we store excess amount of blood glucose from our body. So in other words, we're not using up everything that we eat as a food, and then all of a sudden they get stored as fat. Well, the triglycerides is a fatty ester form of a glycerol molecule, and that particular one basically stores excess calories, unused calories. The LDL cholesterol I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute, but one of the things that doctors use to control cholesterol is a thing called the statin drug. And all it does is it goes into the liver and basically shuts down the precursor for the cholesterol formation. So you're actually making less cholesterol than normal. And that is the way a statin drug works. However, it doesn't always have nice side effects. Let's just go ahead and go into the next slide. I get more detail. Excess cholesterol. Well, cholesterol is actually formed in the body, in your liver. You produce it based on a number of factors, but you can also get cholesterol from the food you eat. So you have two options going on at the same time. One option is the fact that your body makes it. Another option is the fact that your body takes it in. So that when you're put on a statin drug, doctors usually tell you they don't want you eating certain kinds of food because they don't want you bringing in more cholesterol. So how do you get that balance? For most of my life, a genetic flaw is the fact that my total cholesterol was what most people consider to be very low, just barely over 100 milligrams per deciliter. And I found out later that my dad had very low cholesterol, and I think my son also has very low cholesterol. But how low is too low? It took me literally a couple decades to find out because I'd ask that question and nobody knows. And you go on Google and ask around and it's difficult to find out. Most of the time we say, if your total cholesterol is around 200 milligrams per deciliter, you're fine and the doctors are happy. However, that's not always the case. You could have 250 or 300, but it depends on what the ratio is of your total cholesterol to your high density HDL cholesterol. And that is the one that is really more critical than anything else, because if you have a lot of HDL, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, then we have good things happen to us. But if you take the ratio, let's say in my case, let's say it was 100 total and my HDL was 40, then 100 over 40 is 2.5. Well, anything between 1.0 and 3.5 is considered optimum. That's where your doctor really wants you to be at. But literally anything below 5.0 is good. And that's the normal range. But the dietary cholesterol, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in detail with regard to what foods and everything is, provides an additional source of cholesterol for the body. But as I said, the cholesterol is needed in every single cell in the body. However, it's not the villain you think it is, because cholesterol is not the problem. The problem is the oxidized cholesterol. And that oxidation is the issue that happens. And that's a cause for literally everything. We start with our free radicals that go down to the cellular level. They rip electrons off of stable molecules. The resulting molecule becomes a free radical and goes attacks another one, it's just an ongoing process. Left unchecked, now you have oxidation occurring in the body. That oxidation is just like rust on a pipe. You leave it outside, and that rust that forms on the outside is literally the same oxidation, except for us in our bodies. that oxidation becomes a problem, because as the cholesterol is oxidized, then the plaque is formed in the heart, and we have a problem of excess plaque that reduces the blood flow, which increases your heart risk of coronary artery disease and many other things. So how high is too high? Well, it's the absolute number is not a major portion. I think a lot of people, I've had friends of mine, they say their doctor said their cholesterol is getting near 200 and they want to put them on a statin drug. Well, they're still in the good range. I said, well, what's your ratio? It was never discussed. So if you have a doctor who wants to put you on a statin drug, or you're on a statin drug, find out what your ratio is, because maybe you don't need to be there. The ratio is more important than just the total numbers by themselves. But the oxidized cholesterol from food, it comes from fried chicken, any kind of fried French fries, any kind of fried activity, fried food increases your oxidation levels in your body. This happens because you have extra polyunsaturated acids. Almost all of your cooking oils are high in a trans fat. Smoking is probably one of the major causes of oxidation in the body, and more so in women than in men. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we talk about LDL. That's the one that causes the plaque in the heart. But what is the real function of the LDL? Well, LDL your cholesterol has to get to certain parts of the body, to every cell, to every tissue. LDL is the carrier of that cholesterol. It actually gets you from point A to point B, gets you from the liver to everywhere it needs to go. And as you're going through, now all of a sudden, if it's oxidized, you have a plaque forming in the body, in the arteries. That plaque can either be cholesterol that's oxidized or calcium. Calcium is a vitamin deficiency more than an oxidation issue. But as you look at the individual plaque in the arteries, it doesn't matter whether that plaque is in the heart, the brain, the kidneys, or anywhere else. Those are issues that anywhere you have a plaque buildup, you're going to have a problem. You have plaque buildup, say, in the arteries in your arms or legs or feet. It's called peripheral artery disease, PAD. You can have aneurysms form because of the plaque, a lot of kidney disease, even strokes, TIAs, transient ischemic attacks. A lot of issues are caused by that plaque buildup. As it builds up, we have a thing called atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. And that can be, the risk factors for that can be your total cholesterol, your triglycerides, your high blood pressure, smoking, diabetes, obesity, saturated fats that you choose to eat, lack of exercise, stress, family history, sleep apnea, diet. Now, family history is an important one, but just because you have a genetic disposition for something to occur doesn't mean that it's going to occur. We actually have a thing called epigenetics. So when you have a switch, you turn it on, the gene is activated. You can just as easily turn that gene off, but you control that by your lifestyle choices. The coronary artery disease is basically the beginning of everything that becomes a heart issue. How do you reverse all this? Well, the same things we said that cause it or increase the risk are the things you need to reverse. So as you start reversing the trans fats that you're eating, reducing the triglycerides by reducing the number of carbohydrates you eat, controlling your weight, controlling your stress, a lot of issues, lifestyle choices will put everything back in balance so that your cholesterol is where it needs to be. It's not way high, but it's down in that manageable region where it's supposed to be. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide now. As we look at oxidized cholesterol, we talked about the inflammation, the oxidation, dietary issues. If you're starting to bring in more foods that are high in cholesterol, oxidized cholesterol, we have a problem there. Smoking, trans fats. Every one of these things are controllable. How do you control inflammation and oxidation? That's your fruits and vegetables, your antioxidants. Your dietary issues, look for something balanced nutrition. Caloric restriction, cutting back on the total number of calories, cutting back on smoking, moderate alcohol consumption, avoiding trans fats. Saturated fat is not a big deal, but again, like anything else, in moderation, it's fine. But you take care of each one of those things and you will end up adjusting the level that's in the body. So you want the healthy fats, You want to avoid the things that are causing you harm. Now, what foods are really good with to reverse that? Well, one of the better ones is actually Swiss chard, salmon, garlic, tomatoes, um, spinach, any kind of leafy green vegetable, green tea, grapefruit, walnuts. And those are the things. Now, one of the things that actually reduces cholesterol that's been oxidized is the HDL cholesterol. It goes out there and reaches around that plaque and rips off that and sends it back to the liver to be processed out of the body. And then how do you improve that HDL? Well, it's exercise, weight management, stress management, eating healthy fats, avoiding smoking, the kinds of things that you're going to be doing to literally put in check every single aspect of a heart disease. Let's go to the next slide, please. Small, dense LDL. This is something you don't typically get when you get your cholesterol blood test done. They'll give you the HDL and the total and the LDL, but the VLDL, the very low or the very dense small ones, this particular one, its specific mission in life, its function is to carry triglycerides. Again, another form of fat, but it's one subcategory, but most of the time it's never ever actually measured. It can be, it's just not there. So what causes it? High carbohydrate intake, refined sugar, trans fats, those all increase your VLDL or your small dense lipoprotein. Reversal, same as before, the choice of healthy fats, reduce your carbohydrates, reduce your refined sugars, increase soluble fibers. That's a very good way of doing it. Exercise, stress management, all of these other things that we talk about, each one of them works. Some work a little bit better than others in specific small cases. Why don't we go ahead and jump into the next category there, Dr. Jacqueline? Low HDL. Well, HDL absorbs the carbohydrate, cholesterol, and it clears it from the body. That's the function of the HDL. It takes it back to the liver, and actually high HDL reduces your risk of heart disease. Now, yes, you can't have it too high. When you get it too high, then everything kind of gets muddled and it can't do its job properly. What causes HDL to be low? Smoking, overweight, lack of exercise, too many carbs, and a lot of medicines affect it. And the main health cause again is it increases the risk of heart disease. How do you reverse it? Same way we just talked about on all the other ones. Better diet, moderate use of alcohol, stop smoking, weight management, stress management. Every one of those items will in fact increase your HDL. Let's go to the next one. The next two are related, but vitamin D and vitamin K, if you look at the actual process that goes on, let's take a look at the vitamin D first. We have our skin. The sunlight hits the skin, and that precursor, the 7-dehydroxy cholesterol, makes a precursor to the vitamin D. It goes into your liver, but that assumes you have enough magnesium in your body at that point in time to actually get it into the liver. It leaves the liver as another 25 hydroxy vitamin D and goes into the kidneys. Again, you need magnesium to get it there. Once it gets there, then it becomes the active vitamin D that we're looking for. I think it's 1,25 hydroxy vitamin D. That's the vitamin D that now flows through the entire body that works in many, many different functions all over the body. But its primary function with regard to our heart health and everything else is it absorbs calcium and phosphate. The health concerns are anything dealing with brittle bones, fatigue, bone pain, muscle wellness for all package, muscle strength. It even has effect on mood and depression. But the vitamin D3, when you look at the heart and how things actually start happening, that vitamin D has to have the ability to get to where it needs to go. So if you're low on magnesium, chances are you're not going to be making up. If you're covering up your skin with clothing and the UVB rays can't get down to be converted, you put sunblock on, you avoid sun during certain times of the day, you're decreasing the level of vitamin D that you can actually get. The reverse for that is exposure. Get more sunlight. 10 to 20 minutes a day in the sun for most people is a non-issue. As a redhead, I have to watch my time. I'm out there for more than that. I wear a hat. I'm very, very careful about being out for long periods of time. Certain foods also help. Cod liver oil, salmon, mushrooms, eggs. There are a lot of different things that increase our internal body's vitamin D. But when we pull the whole thing together and we look at how does this thing work, if I start with our bones and say, well, how do I get that healthy bone? The starting point is the calcium that we take into our body. The calcium has to get to the bones. But when the calcium comes in, gets into the stomach, if you don't have enough magnesium, it's not very bioavailable to the body. It ends up in the toilet. If it's passing through the duodenum, getting ready to leave the stomach, if you have enough vitamin D3, that vitamin D3 is going to reach out and grab that calcium and bring it into the bloodstream. That calcium in the bloodstream now is going to go to two places, either the heart valves and arteries or to your bones. If you have enough vitamin K2, then it's going to go to your bones. Let's go to the next slide, please. That vitamin K2 will actually put it into the bones and teeth in places where it needs to go. The vitamin K2, if you don't have enough of it, it's going to go to your heart valves and arteries and become plaque. So now you have a source of plaque that's oxidized LDL cholesterol, and now you have calcium. So you have two different kinds of plaque going there. And vitamin K is made up of several monoquinones. The two primary ones are 4 and 7. 4 is a very fast acting and probably the real powerhouse of the vitamin K2. The monoquinone number 4, if you get it in high dosages, actually will go in there and start ripping apart the cholesterol molecules, the calcium part of that plaque. The HDL will take care of the oxidized LDL. So you need increased amount of HDL and you need increased amount of MK4, monoquinone 4 of vitamin K2. Both of those will work in conjunction with each other to start removing plaque from the heart valve. Now, I had a couple different things that came to me here within the last 20 some years. After I left the Navy, I found out that I was osteopenia. I'd never had a bone density test. And from running miles a day and lifting weights and doing everything for decades, I was surprised that I had what would be considered the beginning of a bone disease. And that's when I started trying to find out, well, what caused that? Well, I found out that when your blood pH is outside the range, in other words, it's basically acidic, below 7.35 to 7.45. When it's below that 7.35, the blood will actually go into the bones and rip out calcium to keep the blood pH normal. So now you have calcium in the bloods is being stolen by your blood itself because you're not maintaining an alkaline body. So the fruits and vegetables maintain alkalinity in the body. Proteins, fats, carbohydrates, breathing, digestion, living, everything in general is acidic. And as such, you need more vitamins, more veggies, and more fruits to give you that alkaline body, in other words, something above 7.35 to 7.45. And when you have that happening, it's not being taken out. But if you're in acidosis, in other words, below 7, the body's constantly leaching calcium out of the bones in order to keep it there. Well, that was kind of a surprise. And you can fix that. You just reverse the entire process and you start having adequate amounts of vitamin D, magnesium, calcium, and vitamin K2. Now, what are sources of vitamin K2? Well, you have vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. The body will actually convert some K1 to K2. Not as much as we need, but a lot of it. And they come from leafy green vegetables, but you can also get the K2 from beef liver, from poultry, pork chops, chicken, cheese, bacon, a lot of places for that. But the K2 is synthesized, and that's where your bone and your heart health are all maintained by that K2. When you have an inadequate amount or it's not being absorbed properly, now you have a problem. But the other part that I had, again, up close and personal, was a couple of years ago, I had some chest pains, not an angina, but these are like needle points into my pectoral muscles. Doctor misdiagnosed it as a angina, which we've since corrected. But I thought I was having a problem. So anyway, long story short, they went in and did a catheterization of my heart, and they found out that my left anterior descending artery, what they call the widowmaker, was clogged, was basically not allowing blood to get through with any amount of force. My heart actually did a DIY double bypass. It grew two brand new arteries, one around the front of my heart, one around the back of my heart, and right down to where the junction of the blockage was, and provides my heart with the ability to provide blood throughout the rest of my body. Now, what caused that? I had a long discussion with the doctor. And we're really not sure, but basically, when you're very, very active in your early part of your life and you put a lot of demand on oxygen going to various places, in other words, if you're out running, several miles at a time on a regular basis, that demand causes the heart to react accordingly. And somewhere over time, my body grew an extra couple blood vessels, a couple arteries to meet that demand. And I'm very thankful for it, because about 90% of the people who have a blockage of the LADA ends up with in the morgue, because it's just not something you recover from very easily. But the issue is that you have to have the right amounts of everything. And most of us are deficient in so many different vitamins and minerals. But the heart, you balance everything. It's uh, a lifestyle choice. You maintain your weight, you eat a balanced diet, cut back on the total calories, exercise. Now, exercise can be something just as 30 minutes of just going out and walking. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and running 5 miles or whatever it may happen to be. Taking your blood pressure on a regular basis, knowing what it is. If there's a problem, contacting your doctor. Keeping your blood glucose levels under control. Maintaining, staying away from diabetes. You're getting an annual physical. All of these things help. There's just things that are just common sense, but we get into habits, our comfort zones, and we don't eat the things that we should be eating. And as such, we start having a problem, and then one leads to another. Just like you're treating a heart disease, it's not one thing you're treating. There's 18 or 20 different things that can be causing that problem. So if I'm treating my cholesterol and I'm not treating my vitamin D or my vitamin K or 3 or 4 other things that also could cause a problem, well, I may be thinking I'm fine and not, because my doctor's only looking at one thing, cholesterol. They're not looking at everything else. The cholesterol is actually a fairly easy thing to control. And anyway, at that point in time, Dr. Jacqueline, I think I'm going to call it quits. We're a couple minutes early in today's show, but that's fine. But I really wanted to hit the cholesterol issue today and make sure that people knew what the difference between that was. And it wasn't the only heart problem that people hone in on. But doctors seem to be really big on, hey, you got high cholesterol, let's give you a statin drug and we'll monitor it and go from there.
Thank you, Red. Once again, another very insightful episode that you shared today. And I do have a couple of questions.
Go right ahead.
I know I've asked you about this before, but I'm still trying to get it clear in my mind. So when it comes to the vitamin D and it comes to going outside, is it based on your research and your experience, is it okay if we go out before the prime hours, let's say 10 to 4, depending where you are in the world, and we don't wear sunscreen and we don't have a hat, but we're going to go for a walk for 30 minutes? Is that a good way to get vitamin D or not?
Oh, absolutely. But again, it depends on what latitude you're at. You're down in Florida right now. Pretty soon you'll be back up in New Jersey. That distance in latitude is you're not going to get as much vitamin D in New Jersey as you do in Florida. If you're in Denver, the altitude above sea level, you're going to get more sunshine radiation than you do at sea level, because it's being filtered through that extra amount of air. Your age, if you were a 30-year-old going out and walking for 30 minutes in the sunshine, you're going to get a lot more efficiency of your body converting vitamin D than you would if you're 50 or 60 or 70 years of age. The color of your skin processes it. At the darker your skin, the lower amounts of vitamin D are going to be processed. The lighter color of your skin, the more is going to be processed per square inch. And just the amount of exposure. I have a little bit more exposure on the top of my head than you do. So I'm going to be having more of that exposure going straight through that skin here, but other people have a hat on or it's covered up with hair. So there's a lot of different factors with regard to that. The time of the year, if you're in, say, Miami and it's January versus July, you're going to get a lot more sun exposure in July than you will when the sun's below the equator. So a lot of different factors, but in general, it's the amount of exposure, where you're at, color of your skin, just a lot of different factors in there.
Thank you for sharing that. And my second question is, for people who are going to start setting up their doctor's appointments. I know some people like to get it all done before the summer, or they're planning for the fall because the doctors aren't actually available. They're already booked. What are the tests that we should definitely ask whether the doctor suggests them or not, that we could say, hey, doctor, I'd really like to have this or that test done to make sure that my heart is healthy, to make sure that I have all of the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals that I need.
Okay. The standard test the doctor runs, the panels that they do are pretty good. There's nothing wrong with that. They test the liver and the kidneys. They test a lot of different parts of the body. However, I get 3 tests done, and you can get those tests done before you ever go to the doctors and just take the results to them. One is a vitamin D, is a 25 hydroxy vitamin D test. It's a blood test, and that blood test tells you what your level of vitamin D is in your body. And that active vitamin D is the one that you really need to have high. Now, most of the time, they're going to tell you anything less than 30 is considered deficient. I consider anything less than 50 nanograms per milliliter deficient. You really need 50 or more. If you're being treated for a serious disease, COVID, cancer, anything, you want it above 80. You want that vitamin D circulating in the blood as much as possible. That vitamin D is something I consider to be very, very important. During COVID, I try to keep mine above 100, and I have in most cases. I think my last one was 90 something, but the year before was 108. But it's one of those tests that I always get done. The other test that I like to have done is called the C-reactive protein. It measures inflammation in the body. You want to have as little as possible. You want to have come back being unable to detect. And that basically says that you have no inflammation that the test can pick up. As you get inflammation starting in the body, it's going to produce this protein. It's called C-reactive protein. And that's just an indicator. It won't tell you whether you have inflammation in the brain, the kidneys, or anywhere else. It just says in the body somewhere you have inflammation. That can be controlled by antioxidants, but it's a very nice test to have, because if you have it really high and you can't figure out what's going on, maybe you have the start of a cancer or some other kind of problem that caught early enough, it's a non-issue. The other one I like to have done, and this is homocysteine level test. This is a test of heart health. It used to be considered the gold standard. Nowadays, the gold standard is the ratio of your omega-3 to omega-6. And that's a very, very good test, just not offered everywhere. But the homocysteine level test tells you when your heart becomes starting to have a heart issue, problem, inflammation, everything, the homocysteine in the body is increased. It's very easy to control that, because your vitamin B1, B6, B12, trimethylglycine, all of those things provide a way to reduce the homocysteine that's in the body. And those are the 3 that are typically never offered. You can go down to a local lab, do a Google check, homocysteine level, C-reactive protein, vitamin D3 test near me, or low cost. I did a check on that not too long ago. And generally speaking, you can probably get all 3 of those done, each for under $20. So if you're paying for them yourself, boom, you take them into the doctor. You don't have to worry about getting the results back. Usually when I go in a week ahead of time, get my blood work done, they do all those other tests at the same time. They just draw extra vials of blood, send them out to be done. But those are the ones that I have. And whether you do it yourself or have it done at your doctor's office, sometimes they will tell you, hey, we don't know whether your insurance will cover this or not. Hey, send me a bill. But let's not be that flippant. Go down and pay for it yourself, because what test you can get for $19.95 may be $195.95, because somebody else has to have their profit built into that. So I would say just go down to a local lab, have the test done. That way you have the results. You can take them into your doctor, and you can go. Let's say your homocysteine is a little high. You can go back 3 months later and have another one run. Now you know it's going in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you for that information. And one more question that I thought of. You mentioned about exercise, 30 minutes going for a walk. I know a number of people, that's their main go-to. They go outside and they go for a walk, which is great for a lot of reasons. But I always believed that you have to do weight-bearing exercise as well. And well, we're outside walking, maybe we're swinging our arms, but what are we doing for our upper body? What are we doing for our core? So in terms of speaking from a research perspective and also as an athlete, what are your thoughts as we get older about weight-bearing exercises and doing exercises for our upper body?
Well, weight bearing doesn't have to be weights.
Mm-hmm.
A push-up, a lot of things can be done. Yeah, you can put a 5-pound weight in each arm and go and walking. But the biggest problem we have as we get older is our sarcopenia. We lose our muscle mass. And as such, we end up with the inability to be as strong or grip strength that we had before. We lose our balance, we lose our strength, we lose endurance. And if you're looking at only one thing, strength, that's one of 4 or 5 that you should be looking at. As we get older, balance becomes a major issue. So you have grip strength to open things up, to be independent. Endurance. Now, endurance might be a very short-term endurance. I prefer to do sprints as opposed. I used to run miles and miles a long time ago. Now I'll do a dozen or whatever number, 10, 12, 15, 100-yard dashes. And to me, that's a much better exercise than what I was doing when I was out running for an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours. Those kinds of things all come in, but you have to look at, now, are you getting strength, balance, endurance? Those are things that have to be factored in. So yes, I think it's very important to answer your question. You do need upper body strength, but you don't necessarily need heavy weights at the gym to do that. But you can certainly get there on a machine and push out and pull back. That's doing upper body. If you use a free weight and you're on a bench and you're going back and forth, that's a little bit better because that gives you a wider range for the muscles to do, as opposed to a straight in and out in a certain in a certain parallel. So each one has its advantages, and so I'm just mix them up and take one day and just work on balance, stretching, lots and lots of different kinds of exercises that can be done.
Thank you for sharing that. And one thing I also think is very important, especially as we get older, is making sure that we stretch our Achilles tendon, because there's so many people, they play golf, they play tennis, especially down here in South Florida as they get older, and that Achilles tendon is so tight and they're not stretching it out. So one thing I really like to do is I like to sit on my feet, if that makes sense. So I put my shins on the floor and I sit down on them. And then this really, it's a great way to stretch out your feet too, because if you think about how much our work our feet do, and we don't actually give them a break. So I think that it's important to stretch out the Achilles. I think it's also important to work on your balance, critically important. And then for upper body and even core, as you mentioned, the push-up. And of course, there's always the plank. Whether the plank is on your elbows or on your hands, that's a great way to engage your entire body and your mind.
There's a dozen different planks that can be done, just like there are push-ups. But one of the things that you mentioned, I had a problem in boot camp. I had a what's the one there in the heel? You just mentioned a second ago, in my mind is Achilles tendon. I had an Achilles tendon pull in boot camp, and I was unavailable for exercise in boot camp, if you can believe that, for about 10 of the 16 weeks I was there. And as a result, when the last 6 weeks came about, I had to make up for a lot of stuff that I hadn't done earlier. But one of the things that I learned in running is I always stretch before and after. Now, in the old stretch, you put your leg up there and you stretch your leg as best you can. But if you look at stretching, it's not always the direction you're going in. Let's say that I take my hand, and I'm just going to show you a little example here. I take my hand and I want to push back toward my wrist. So if I take and push back, and all I'm doing is just pushing back, right there in the camera, I can get about, let me see, go over here in the blue area. I can get probably an inch, inch and a half. And I can sit there and I can do that all day long, and I'm not going to improve the stretch in that muscle. However, if I take my thumb and I'm pushing it in the opposite direction of the stretch. So in other words, now I take and I push, and for about 10 to 15 to 20 seconds. So I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to try to push my other hand out of the way, but I'm not going to move my other hand. So I'm going to lock that in place and just stretch and stretch and stretch. I'm trying to move my hand, this hand here, I'm trying to move, and I'm not making any success, but I'm stretching against it. I'm pushing against it. And I do that, let's just say for 10 seconds now. Relax for a second. And if I come back and I look at my ability, I can touch my arm. And the same thing applies whether it's your back muscle, your shoulder muscle, your leg muscles. You have to stretch in the opposite direction of that particular muscle group that you're looking at trying to improve. So if I'm doing a leg stretch, I'm going to put my leg up, heel on top of the back of a bench, and I'm going to stretch that way for a while. Same thing, I could be stretching my Achilles and everything. But then my next set of stretches, I'm going to be pushing down on my knee and pushing up with my quads and my my muscles in my legs in order to get that reverse stretch. That's where that muscle actually begins to lengthen. And that's one of the things that most people don't tell you about.
Very true. And something else I think is vitally important as we get older is to be able to get out of a chair without using your hands.
Yeah.
So everybody who's sitting, try that. If you're sitting down, I'm standing, but if you're sitting down, try to stand up without using your hands. And when I first observed this was a few years ago on a plane. Have you ever seen when someone gets up on a plane and they pull on the rows ahead of them, and it's because they don't have the strength to get up? If you can get up without using your hands, that engages so much of your body, and it also helps you with your balance and your posture.
Sitting on the floor is another place to improve your balance. The number of places you have to touch, the higher the number of things you have to touch, the less physically fit you are. Ideally, you should be able to just get up without touching anything. Just put your feet together and get up. However, most of us have to touch here or there, and by the time we get done, we've touched 7 different things, and we're finally standing up, still bent over on something. But these are just little things that, as you get more involved, more aware, become educated, and it's just we take things for granted that we know everything we need to know, and we don't. And I've been to the gym for 20 years in a row. I've done all these other. Well, that's nice, but it's not necessarily everything you need to know. There are a lot of things out there that we're constantly finding out something new about. I've learned several new things this year I never knew about because they're finally published and you have access to them. But anyway.
Lots of great tips. I hope people out there, whether they're watching on the live or they're listening or they're watching on the replay or listening, you try some of these things, incorporate them into your regular routine. I have to say my mother can get up every single time without holding on. And I really admire that she stands right up, whatever she's doing. She doesn't even realize it. And I think to myself, that's a strong person. So that's what we want. We want to be as strong as we possibly can physically and mentally. And thank you for sharing all of this wonderful information. I really appreciate it, Red.
I will catch you next week. Look forward to it.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye now.
Well, that's the end of our programming for today. And what a great way to end the day with tips that we can all take in and embrace and incorporate into our lives. That's what we're all about here at USA Global TV and Radio: education, entertainment, inspiration, and hope. If you would like to be one of our team members, we actually have 4 teams presently. Our teams are the co-hosting team, the Talking Heads expert presenters teams, the elevated listeners team, and our team of panelists. You can go over to my website, which is USA Global TV, and you can actually contact me and let me know what it is you're interested in. If you have an idea for something that you'd like to do on our channel, please let me know. We are exploring all kinds of options for other types of projects that are out of the box. So that's what we're doing here behind the scenes, and also giving people the ability to have their own show that is not related to USA Global TV. So if you're interested in any of these things, or you'd like to have your own show on our platform, please do reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Also, my last ask is that you go over and order my new book, Adversity to Awesome. And this is available in paperback as well as ebook. The ebook is 99 cents and the paperback is $9.99. In this book, you will find stories from 12 different people. My chapter is the first one, and I shared something that I carried with me for many decades, that I lived in shame and really affected my whole life. So I've stepped out into the light, as have these other authors, and it's definitely information that will help you move into your light and be your own lighthouse. Thank you again. God bless you all. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we have another full day of broadcasting. Bye for now.